Welcome to FearBound Stories. Please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let's begin. Arthur Art Mendez had been the janitor at Lincoln High for almost 2 decades. He'd seen the place in every state imaginable, loud and crowded when the bell rang, trashed after pep rallies, eerily silent during summer. The night shifts didn't bother him. If anything, he liked them. He could work at his own pace, no kids to dodge, no teachers looking down their noses at him. Just him, the hum of the fluorescents, and the smell of floor polish. But there was one part of the school he never liked: the East Wing. During the day, it seemed like any other stretch of hallway. Rows of lockers, faded trophy cases, posters taped to walls. But at night, something about it shifted. The air was heavier there. The lights flickered more often. And Art always felt as though the East Wing was waiting for him. Still, he was a professional. It was on his route, and he didn't cut corners. It was close to midnight on a Wednesday when it happened. He wheeled his cart into the East Wing, the mop sloshing in its bucket. The corridor stretched out ahead, dimly lit by buzzing tubes overhead. Art started at one end, dipping the mop into the water, swabbing the floor in slow strokes. He hummed quietly, the tune echoing too loudly against the tile. But after a few minutes, he noticed something strange. The exit door at the far end didn't seem any closer. He frowned, wiped his forehead, and glanced back. The hall behind him seemed longer too. Much longer. His cart and mop bucket trailed far back, dozens of feet away, though he hadn't walked that far. "Getting tired, Mendez," he muttered. He bent back to his mop, forcing himself to focus. But with every step, the door at the end seemed to shift farther away. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Sweat prickled his neck. He stopped and looked up again. The hallway stretched impossibly now, the lockers on both sides blurring into the distance. The overhead lights flickered one by one, buzzing, stretching the shadows into sharp angles. The posters had changed too, no longer sports flyers or pep rally announcements. Now they were old, yellowed, torn. Some had writing in languages Art didn't recognize. Others showed images, distorted faces, hands with too many fingers, twisted black shapes reaching toward him. He stumbled back, heart hammering. The mop clattered to the ground. That was when the lockers started rattling. It began with one. A soft metallic click like a door nudged open, then another, then dozens. The entire row of lockers shook violently, banging and clanging as if fists were pounding from inside. The noise built until it was deafening, echoing down the endless corridor. Art clapped his hands over his ears, panic surging. He bolted forward, eyes fixed on the glowing exit sign in the distance. But the harder he ran, the farther away it seemed. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, out of rhythm with his own. He spun around. Far down the hallway, at the edge of the flickering light, a figure stood. Tall, thin, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. It didn't move. It just watched. Art's throat went dry. His legs trembled. The figure took one step forward. The locker slammed all at once, metal ringing like a gunshot, and the exit door slid farther away. Art ran, stumbling, slipping in the water his mop had left behind. But the water moved wrong. Instead of spreading out, it flowed toward him, rushing between his boots like a tide pulling him back. He screamed, but his voice came out muffled, as if the hallway itself was swallowing the sound. The footsteps behind him grew louder, closer. Then, right beside his ear, a whisper, "You'll never leave." Suddenly, his hand hit a door, the janitor's closet. He yanked it open and dove inside, slamming it shut. Darkness swallowed him. He pressed his back against the shelves, chest heaving, listening. The footsteps stopped. The lockers went still. Silence. Minutes passed, hours maybe. Time didn't feel real anymore. When he finally dared to open the door again, he was back in the East Wing. But the exit was only a few feet away. Art stumbled out, gasping into the parking lot. The night air froze his sweat, his breath visible in frantic bursts. He didn't go back for his mop or cart. He drove home in silence, headlights cutting through the empty streets. The next morning he convinced himself it was exhaustion, maybe a dream, maybe stress. But when he returned that night, the East Wing floor was still wet. His mop was gone, and scrawled across the lockers, written in dripping black letters, were the words, "You never left." Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Malcolm Tate had only been at Fairview Hospital for 3 months when the basement began to feel wrong. He had taken the job out of desperation. Bills piled up after his divorce, and janitorial work wasn't glamorous, but it paid. Nights were usually quiet. The hospital slowed after midnight. Fewer visitors, fewer emergencies. Just the occasional nurse walking quickly down the halls, or the low murmur of a doctor dictating notes. But the basement was his territory. He mopped the tiled floors, carried trash from supply closets, and checked on equipment storage. At first, he told himself the unease he felt down there was normal. Old buildings had their quirks. The air was always colder, damp with the smell of mildew. The pipes hissed and dripped, the lights buzzed overhead. But over time, the unease grew heavier. He noticed how sound carried strangely down there. Footsteps echoing too long, whispers bouncing off walls long after they were gone. He noticed doors he never remembered cleaning before. And sometimes, when he thought he was alone, he swore he could hear breathing. It was a Tuesday night in February when the lights first spoke to him. He was halfway down the main corridor, mop sloshing in the bucket, when the fluorescence overhead began to flicker. At first, he ignored it. Faulty wiring, nothing new. But then he realized the flicker wasn't random. The bulbs blinked in sequence, 3 quick flashes, a pause, then 2 slower ones. Malcolm stopped. His mop dripped water onto the floor, each drop echoing in the silence. He frowned at the ceiling. The pattern repeated. 3 flashes, pause, 2 flashes. It was deliberate, like a code. He forced a nervous laugh. "You're tired, old man, that's all." But when he turned the corner, the next hallway lit up in waves, bulbs stuttering one after another, as if something invisible was moving along the ceiling directly above him. His skin prickled. The mop felt heavier in his hands. He wheeled the cart faster, his footsteps echoing in uneven rhythm. When he reached the supply room door, the bulbs above it began stuttering wildly. The message was clearer now. Malcolm froze. His heart banged against his ribs. The word repeated again and again, flashing across the ceiling. Then behind him, the lights began shutting off. One by one, click darkness, click darkness. The blackness rushed toward him like a tide swallowing the hall. Only the lights directly above his head stayed on, buzzing faintly, trapping him in a circle of sickly glow. The water in his bucket trembled, at first faintly, then harder. Ripples spread in perfect circles as though something heavy was stomping nearby. But Malcolm didn't hear a sound. Not at first. Then came the crunch, soft, slow, like a bare foot pressing into snow. But this was concrete. Another crunch, closer. Malcolm's breath hitched. He left the cart behind and bolted. The lights chased him now. Overhead, they blinked in patterns, leading him deeper into the maze. Left, right, left again. Corridors stretched longer than they should have. Corners opened into halls he didn't recognize. The basement was rearranging itself. No matter which way he turned, The lights guided him forward. He realized with horror that they weren't flickering randomly. They were leading him. But leading him where? At last, he stumbled into a dead-end corridor. The walls pressed close. His chest heaved, lungs burning. Above, the bulbs flickered slowly, patiently. This time, they spelled out something new. Malcolm's gut twisted. Every instinct screamed not to obey. But his head lowered against his will. The puddle at his feet rippled. It reflected not his own face, but a woman's. Her skin was corpse pale. Her hair floated around her head as though she were submerged. Her mouth stretched into a silent scream, wider and wider until her jaw looked broken. Dozens of hands appeared behind her in the reflection, clawing at the surface of the water, pressing as though trying to force their way through. Malcolm stumbled back, choking on a cry. The lights above him went out. All of them. The corridor plunged into black, and then the footsteps came. Not one set, not two, hundreds, rushing toward him from every direction. The sound filled the basement, echoing, pounding, growing closer and closer until he felt hot breath at his ear. Malcolm sprinted blindly, his hands scraping concrete walls, his legs trembling with exhaustion. The footsteps stayed with him, never slowing. His screams echoed but were swallowed by the dark. Just when his strength failed, he saw it. A faint red glow. An exit sign. He burst through a maintenance door into the stairwell, tumbling against the steps. The footsteps stopped instantly. Silence. The lights in the stairwell hummed calmly as though nothing had happened. The next morning, Malcolm tried to retrace his path. But the basement was normal again. The supply room sat where it always had. The corridors were short, familiar. The lights glowed steady. No one believed him. But when he returned to his cart, the mop handle was wet, and in the puddle at its base, faint ripples shimmered into words. See you tonight. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Ray Alvarez had worked as the night janitor at Lincoln High for nearly 15 years. He was a quiet man, a man who kept his head down and did his job. Most of the teachers barely noticed him, and the students saw him as just another background figure pushing a mop. But Ray noticed everything. He noticed how the air in the school changed after midnight, how the cheer and laughter of the day bled out, leaving only the echo of old noises lingering in the halls. He noticed how the lights flickered longer in some parts of the building, especially the east hallway, and he noticed how that hallway never quite felt empty, even when it was. The east hall was lined with lockers, hundreds of them. Most were old, dented, painted over dozens of times in faded blues and grays. During the day, they clattered and slammed, filled with kids' voices and laughter. But at night, when Ray walked past them alone, he swore they hummed. Not loud, just under the surface like something breathing behind the metal. For years he ignored the feeling, until one night the locker proved him right. It was a Thursday, just past midnight. Ray was pushing his cart toward the east wing, tired but calm. His flashlight beam jittered across the tiled floor. He had one last stretch to mop before heading home. That was when he heard it. A soft, steady sound. Inhale, exhale, breathing. He stopped mid-step. The sound was faint, but it was there, wet, raspy, echoing off the metal doors. He turned slowly, raising his light. The beam cut across the lockers, one after another, until it landed on the 112. That was the one. The breath seeped out from its thin vents, deep, slow, unnatural. "Who's in there?" Ray called, his voice echoing. No answer, just the sound of lungs pulling air. He stepped closer, heart thumping. He pressed his ear against the cool metal and the breath grew louder. He could hear every rasp, every wheeze, and beneath it, faint whispers. Not one voice, several, layered together, murmuring words too faint to catch. Then, clear as day, he heard it. "Let me out." Ray staggered back, keys jangling in his hands. His mouth went dry. He forced himself forward again, jammed the master key into the lock, and turned. The latch clicked. The door creaked open. Empty. No backpacks, no books. Just bare metal walls, cold and rusting. And on the bottom, a faint mist curling upward like steam from a kettle. The breathing stopped. Ray let out a shaky laugh, slamming the locker shut. "Losing your damn mind, Alvarez." But as he walked away, the door banged loudly behind him. Once, twice, like fists hammering from the inside. The next day, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He told himself it was exhaustion. He was getting old. Maybe his mind was slipping. But when night came, he dreaded the east hallway. And with good reason, because when he finally forced himself down it, his flashlight revealed fresh scratches across the metal of Locker 112. Not shallow graffiti, deep gouges carved from the inside out, and smeared beneath them dark stains. Ray leaned close, his stomach turned. It wasn't paint. It was blood. From then on, every night was worse. Sometimes he'd hear the locker rattling as he passed, shaking violently as though something was trapped inside. Sometimes the breathing would start faint, then build until it drowned out the hum of the lights. And sometimes it spoke. Ray. The first time it said his name, he nearly dropped his mop. The second time he ran. One night, as he rolled his cart past, every locker in the hallway began to bang and rattle at once, deafening, violent, as though hundreds of unseen fists were pounding to get out. The noise shook the tiles, reverberating through his chest. And then all at once, silence. Every door stilled, except a 112. It hung slightly ajar. Ray raised his flashlight with trembling hands. Inside there was something new. A chair, rusty, bolted to the floor, chains hanging from its arms and legs. And for a split second, reflected in the beam, a face. White eyes, grinning teeth, then gone. Ray begged the principal to have the lockers replaced. He made excuses, avoided the hallway whenever possible. But no one listened. The school had no budget for new lockers. And then one morning, everything changed. A student went missing. His backpack was found lying in the east hallway, right in front of locker number 112. When the police arrived, they opened it. Empty, except for a single wet handprint pressed against the inside of the door. Still warm. Ray quit 2 days later. He never set foot in Lincoln High again. But when the night shift janitors came after him, they whispered about the east hallway, about the locker that still breathed, and sometimes whispered your name. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Eddie Hart had been working nights at the Marlowe Insurance Building for almost 8 years. He wasn't the type of man to complain. He liked the quiet, the routine. Every night was the same. Vacuum the cubicles, wipe down the desks, empty the trash, mop the lobby. It was steady work, and after the chaos of his younger life, steady was what he needed. The only thing he didn't like was the mirror. It stood in the executive lobby on the 12th floor, an antique nearly 12 feet tall, framed in tarnished brass. Nobody really knew where it had come from. Some said one of the company's founders had brought it from Europe. Others claimed it was left behind from a different tenant decades earlier. By day, it reflected sunlight from the tall glass windows, bright and clean. At night, when Eddie stood in the dim lobby with only his mop and the hum of the building's generators, the mirror felt alive. He never lingered on it longer than necessary. The first time something felt wrong, he told himself he was tired. He was polishing the surface, moving his rag in slow circles, when he realized his reflection wasn't quite in sync. His arm moved, and half a second later, his reflection followed. Just a flicker, barely noticeable, but enough. He froze, watched, tried again. Same thing, a lag. He laughed nervously, shook his head, and blamed lack of sleep. But the image stayed with him, gnawing. Weeks later, it happened again. He had finished buffing the marble floors and turned to leave. In the corner of his eye, his reflection in the mirror didn't turn with him. It just kept staring, directly at him. From that night on, Eddie avoided looking too long. He cleaned the mirror quickly, always leaving it for last. But he couldn't shake the sense that something on the other side was waiting for him to make a mistake. And then the storm came. It was a Tuesday night in early spring. Thunder rolled above the city, rattling the windows. By midnight, the building lost power. The backup generators kicked in, but only the emergency lights glowed, bathing the hallways in a dull, pulsing red. Eddie pushed his cart nervously, the squeak of its wheels echoing too loud in the empty building. Every shadow looked wrong. Every reflection in the glass doors stretched longer than it should. By the time he reached the 12th floor, his stomach was knotted. The executive lobby felt different. The mirror gleamed even in the red gloom, brighter than anything else in the room. It seemed to pull him toward it, demanding attention. He swallowed, stepped closer, and lifted his rag, and then froze. Because in the mirror, the lobby behind him was full. Dozens of shadowy figures sat in the leather chairs, lined along the walls, crowding the room. They were still, silent, watching. His breath caught. Slowly, he turned around. Nothing. The chairs were empty. He turned back. The figures remained, and now they were all facing him. His knees weakened. He stumbled back, his rag slipping from his hand. The mirror seemed to ripple faintly, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. And then his reflection stepped forward. Not in sync, not copying him, moving on its own. Its skin was pale, its eyes black voids. It pressed its palm against the glass. The surface warped beneath the touch. Eddie whispered, "No, no, no, no." The reflection smiled, and every figure in the seats leaned forward in unison. Eddie bolted, leaving the cart behind. He sprinted through the stairwell, heart hammering, and climbed until his legs burned. He collapsed on the rooftop, rain soaking his uniform, and didn't move until dawn. When the day crew arrived, he tried to explain. They laughed, told him he was exhausted, that storms played tricks on the mind. He thought about quitting, but quitting meant bills unpaid, rent overdue. So he returned. The next night, he reached the lobby again. The mirror was already fogged, but it wasn't fog from his breath. Words were etched across the glass, written backward, only readable in reflection. "Let me out!" Eddie's hand shook as he reached for the surface. It was warm, and beneath the warmth something pulsed, like a heartbeat. He never went back after that shift. But the new janitor who replaced him swore he sometimes saw Eddie's face in the mirror. Not standing in the lobby, but trapped inside it, smiling with black eyes. And behind him, dozens of figures still waiting in the seats. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Frank Dorsey was the kind of janitor every school had once. Quiet, dependable, and invisible. He worked the late shift at Briarwood High, starting after the last staff had gone home and staying until the sun hinted at morning. He knew every creak of the old building, every buzzing light, every cracked tile. He liked the rhythm of it, the solitude. No teachers barking orders, no kids causing trouble, just him and the hum of machines. But the auditorium was different. It wasn't just big, it was cavernous. A sea of empty seats stretching into shadows. A stage that loomed like a waiting mouth, curtains swaying faintly even when the air was still. Even in daylight, the place had a strange feel. At night, Frank hated it. But the auditorium always fell last on his route, and he wasn't a man to cut corners. It was a Thursday in November, rain drumming against the roof when it happened. Frank wheeled his cart into the auditorium just after midnight. His flashlight beam swept over the rows, catching dust swirling in the air. He started with the aisles, broom scratching faintly across the floor. Halfway down the center row, he froze. Someone was sitting in the third seat from the front. A shape leaned back in the chair, still and silent. Frank's mouth went dry. He cleared his throat. "Hey, school's closed. You need to leave." The figure didn't move. He stepped closer, flashlight shaking. The seat was empty. He muttered to himself, "Too many late nights, Dorsey, that's all." He forced himself back to sweeping, but it didn't stop. Every few minutes he caught another glimpse. A man slouched in the back row, a woman leaning forward near the stage, a child perched in the balcony railing. Always there. Always gone when his light hit them. But the cushions were indented, like someone had just risen seconds before he looked. By the time he finished the aisles, his hands were trembling. He climbed the stairs onto the stage, set his broom down, and leaned against the wall for a moment. From here, the seats stretched out into a dark ocean. The silence pressed down hard, heavier than the air in any other part of the school. Then all at once he noticed them. Dozens of faint silhouettes scattered across the seats. They weren't solid, not flesh. More like smoke shaped into people, dim outlines that seemed to drink in the light. His heart thudded painfully. He raised the flashlight. The beam flickered once. When it steadied, the seats were empty again. Frank told himself to finish fast. He bent down to gather his rag, and when he straightened, he nearly dropped it. Someone stood on stage with him. A tall figure at the edge of the curtains, still watching. Frank whipped the flashlight toward it. Nothing, but the boards beneath his feet groaned, heavy as though someone had just stepped closer. He bolted for the doors, shoving at the handles. Locked. They rattled but wouldn't budge. His breath came in shallow bursts. Sweat rolled down his back. Behind him, the seats creaked. 1, 2, 3. Dozens, hundreds. The sound rippled through the auditorium as if people were sitting down one by one. Frank turned slowly, his hand gripping the door handle like a lifeline. Every seat was full. The auditorium was packed. Row after row of shadowy figures sat there, their heads all turned toward him. A whisper drifted through the room. "Showtime!" The stage lights blazed to life, blinding him. Frank staggered backward, hands shielding his eyes. When his vision cleared, he realized he was no longer standing by the door. He was at center stage. The shadows in the seats began to clap. Slow, hollow, deafening. The sound thundered in his chest, echoing off the rafters. The applause grew louder until it drowned out his ragged breathing. Frank screamed, but the sound never left his throat. In the polished floorboards beneath his feet, he saw his reflection. Not standing, not screaming, sitting. Front row, among the shadows, smiling. When the morning staff arrived, they found Frank's cart abandoned at the back of the auditorium. His broom lay in the center of the stage, upright, as if carefully placed there. Frank himself was gone. The police searched, but there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence he had left the building. He had simply vanished. Teachers complained later that no matter how much they vacuumed, the auditorium always smelled faintly of sweat, like a crowd had just left minutes before. And worse, no matter how often the seats were cleaned, they were always warm, as though someone was still sitting there. You've just crossed the boundary between reality and the unknown. If you felt the fear tonight, make sure to subscribe before you leave, because on this channel, every story is just the beginning. New nightmares arrive every few nights, each one darker than the last. Until then, keep your lights low, your doors locked, and your mind open. You are now part of the FearBound family.